Hello and welcome to the latest from Hearts Standard. My name is Joel Sked and I'm delighted to be joined on this occasion by Scott McIntosh. How are you, Scott?
Yeah, very well. Thanks for having me on, Joe.
No problem at all. Thank you for coming on. Because we are here to discuss Heart of Midlothian's 0-0 draw with Rangers in the Scottish Premiership opener at Tynecastle Park on Saturday. We'll touch on the Europa League playoff round draw as well, and a wee bit about Stephen Kingsley, but they'll be quite straightforward. So just jumping straight off into the game, Scott, just kind of overview briefly, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that sort of leapt up to me immediately in terms of how we approached the game. I think we talked a little bit prior to the match about the need to have a bit of pace up top, to not feel isolated up there, to make sure that there's a quick transition, which we'd really only seen from the team during that first half against Tottenham with Tagawa up top. So it was really, I think, seeing Vargas starting up there, it made a lot of sense. And as the game sort of progressed, you could see why that decision was made. But I think just generally speaking, it was really good to see how we matched Rangers. There's always this thing about when you play the Old Firm, if you're wanting a result, you've got to have your best day. They've got to have their worst day. There's got to be a little bit of maybe luck and refereeing decisions thrown in there. There wasn't any luck. There wasn't any refereeing decisions. And I don't actually think this was down to Rangers coming out and just starting the game poorly. I think we had a huge hand in that. So we sort of dictated the control within the game. I know Rangers had a lot of the ball, but I think Stephen Naismith was really astute in his post-match comments where he talked about the good possession that Hearts had, and that Hearts actually made more of their possession than Rangers did, which it is backed up by the stats. Even in the second half, when Philip Coman claimed that Rangers had the better of the game, Hearts still had the better clear openings. So yeah, I think there's a lot to take from it. I think there's real positives in terms of the duels that we won, individually and as a collective. And again, there was that sort of athleticism and sort of aggressiveness that I think we were all wanting from a home performance.
Yeah. Lot to get into there was, so I suppose I'll start. Probably makes sense to start this. The start. What did you make of the starting lineup? And I suppose for me, said that I can't remember if I tweeted it or I was speaking to someone about it. Was the first 15, 20 minutes were how I think Hearts fans want to see, or the approach Hearts fans want to see the team take at Tynecastle, especially against a team like Rangers Celtic, where it is maybe they don't have loads of the ball, but when they do have it, they are direct. And I'm not mean just chucking up the top. That did work at times where they were just looking to not when the space opened up, knock the balls in behind for Vargas to run into, but just be positive with everything they do. And I think Naismith kind of mentioned that in an interview with Hearts TV on Monday when he was talking about the Europa League draw, that it was just such a positive start compared to a lot of times last season. It was a problem, the slow starts.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I understand where the slow starts come from. I think specifically if you're going against teams where they're going to allow you to have more of the ball and they're going to set up with that low block, I can understand why 15, 20 minutes into the game, you maybe are struggling to break them down, and it's about showing a bit of patience, which I think Naismith spoke about at stages last season. I think when you play against Rangers, Celtic, and maybe to a lesser extent Aberdeen and Hibs, they are going to be a little bit more aggressive in the press, and it is going to allow you to be you're going to play a little bit of percentage football, and I quite like that. I think we've seen at times over the last few years in these fixtures that we've tried to dictate control of the ball, but in doing so we've been very passive, and that's really actually allowed the other team to sort of settle into the rhythm of the game and then dictate the sort of the tempo. I felt that on Saturday, because we were very quick to turn their centre halves in particular, and because Tavernier and Ridvan do like to push up more so as, I know they're technically fullbacks, but I think their strengths lie in being wing backs more than anything else. There was those pockets of space which Vargas in particular was very sort of was doing a good job of sort of finding. So I think that helped. The fixture itself, I think, helped in us getting that 15, 20 minutes that I think fans would like to see. But I think you've probably got to add in the warning there, the sort of small print at the bottom to say, as much as that was positive, there will be times this season where I think we will still be frustrated in the opening 10, 15 games against different opposition.
Yeah, that's it, because you have to take it in isolation in the fact that Rangers are, like they had across the first and more so the second half, they're going to have the largest share of possession. Teams like Motherwell aren't going to come and have 55-60% of the possession. They're going to want to do maybe not exactly what Hearts did, but they're going to want to sit in and ease their way into the game, frustrate Hearts, and then build on it from there. So that's where you're going to see that's where I think it's going to be interesting to see that next time. I think it's Dundee United at the end of the month at Tynecastle. That's especially after a European game where maybe a team will be likely more defensive, and just to see the approach Hearts take from there when it's Hearts that are going to have a lot of the ball and are going to be the protagonists to have to then create. But that's for another day. Looking at how the game progressed, and now you've had a couple of days to digest it, was is there anything in particular, whether it's a player, passage of play, how the team played, was there anything that really stood out and or surprised you?
Yeah, I think there was two aspects of the game that surprised me, and it was probably the two areas of the pitch that I had slight concerns about after seeing the team news coming in on the Saturday morning. So I think the left side of the park was an area of concern. I think Penrice had barely kicked the ball since the start of February. So although he'd missed, pre-season, he'd also not really been playing competitively for a few months. I think Barry Mackay's missed a lot of football over the last 12 months as well. And again, we know that he can be a bit of an aloof player. It's particularly in these fixtures where he's maybe not seeing as much of the ball. Can he get engaged, sort of proactively in a defensive sort of aspect? So that was a little bit of a concern. But to be fair, I thought Penrice done really well. I thought Barry Mackay was really good, particular first half. I thought he fell out of it a little bit second half. But I think there's reasons for that in terms of how Rangers sort of changed slightly sort of after half time. But I thought they both really impressed me. And I think the second one was probably the partnership between Grant and Devlin. Now, I do think it was helped by the fact that I think Tom Lawrence offered nothing for Rangers in that number 10 position. So it's not a pairing I think will have success in other fixtures. For example, I don't think I would play that pairing this weekend against the likes of Luke McCowan sort of playing and Lyle Cameron playing for Dundee. So I do think it is a case of sort of matching up against your opposition and seeing where their weaknesses and strengths lie. But on Saturday it worked really well. I thought that, again, they won a lot of their second balls, Cammy in particular, and I thought George Grant looked really engaged, playing in a deeper role, whether that's having more of the game in front of him or whether it's having the likes of Mackay back from injury, Jan Danda in the team, maybe certain individuals that are maybe, making those types of runs that he's maybe been looking for the last year or two, but maybe not seeing from other individuals that maybe play with their head down a little bit more in those sort of wider areas. So I do think he looked far more engaged and probably had his best game for us. So that was the two areas that really surprised me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those where there's some games where I'm working and I'm just like, I have no idea what to write here because nothing's really happened. There's not something in it stood out or surprised. I found myself as the game progressed, like I could write about a lot of individuals within the Hearts team or a lot of partnerships. Like you said, James Penrice, barely mentioned him, despite him being really, really strong, considering those factors that you mentioned with him. Barely having, he had the pre-season, but he only featured in one of the pre-season friendlies at Fleetwood.
Fleetwood was his only game, yeah.
And but then he kind of really stepped up because, again, that was one of the debating points. If it's a back four, do you bring Kingsley in and then do you move Kai Rose to left back, or have Kingsley playing at left back and Kai Rose in there? I think a lot of people would have went down that route if they were going to play a back four, just to have that kind of bit of safety and ease James Penrice in. But no, he really stood up to it, and I suppose he was overshadowed by someone else that we're going to speak about in other flank. Grant and Devlin, yeah, they were brilliant. I thought Grant watching the game, I thought Grant was better, or kind of grew into it more. Whereas was if you looked at stats, it was Cammy Devlin who was the kind of the better, more involved player. But as a combination, they were really good, and I thought Grant played the more understated role, came up with a few key interventions on the edge of the box in the second half. And then, just someone I mentioned was Kai Rowles, and there was always a concern how he would do up against Cyril Dessers, because he struggled against Dessers last season on a couple of occasions. But I thought him and Kent were really, really solid. It's one of those where you kind of just expect that from Kent, so it wasn't a surprise or anything notable. Whereas Kai Rowles, it was one of his better performances. I think he kind of stood up to the battle, and he was aggressive and engaged. But then there was, I thought Vargas played really well. I suppose we might come and talk him, but Gerald Taylor was the standout. There was one everyone was speaking about. And what did you make of his performance? And have you ever been as excited or thrilled by just a fullback or a defender in general?
Yeah, I mean, there's aspects to his game that you maybe saw at times for Callum Patterson, but this is going to sound harsh, and we are dealing with a very small sample size, but I think defending in one-on-one situations, he looks an improvement on what Callum Patterson was as a wing-back for us. I think when we all think about all the sort of good moments that Patterson had in a Hearts jersey, it was notably sort of going forward, driving forward, the threat that he had for set plays. I think in one-on-one situations, he wasn't really that strong, considering he was still quite a young player at that time as well. Whereas you can see with Taylor, Cortez is someone that Rangers were, hanging their hat this season. They were quite confident that he's somebody that could offer them something. He had a decent little spell before he got injured last season, and within about 10 minutes, he was starting to cut inside, and you thought, he doesn't fancy this, or at least he doesn't fancy trying to beat him for pace, which I think he probably will with about 90 to 95% of the rest of the league. But you got that impression that within about 5-10 minutes, he thought, this isn't going to work for me today. Matondo actually had a little bit more joy out of him, but I think that was more to do with the fact that I think Taylor was starting to seize up a little bit with a back complaint, and he was struggling a little bit. But yeah, it was a great debut, and I think the mark of his performance was probably seeing individuals on Twitter who are specifically from your closest rivals in terms of sort of Hibs and Aberdeen, even pointing out that he looked like a shrewd bit of business when they would normally be quite quick to point out deficiencies. And I do think because of his character, I think there will be moments, there'll be issues where he maybe will sell a goal or two, or he'll sell chances. But I think you've just got to take the positives over the sort of the occasional negative with Taylor. And I think it's just a case you just enjoy him while he's here. If that's going to be his performance level, a handful of those types of performances on TV, and you just know scouts will be sniffing about him because what we'd already discussed last week, even prior to the Rangers game, he's got all the physical attributes that you can't train in someone. And English teams would love that. They know that, if there is positional things that you need to work on or issues we one-to-one defending, you can work on that in coaching. What you can't teach are the sort of genetic, attributes that he brings to the game. So yeah, it was as good a debut as I think I've seen in quite some time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's not just his pace, but the fact that he can turn quickly and he can get his body across, and he's strong and he uses it really well. I like the fact that his decision making was really good, in that when he's seen a ball, if it was a pass that was played out to her, it happened once. Certainly one that I can remember. It was a pass played out and it didn't have enough on it, and he was first to react, and he was onto it and away. Whereas other times where he would happily back off Cortez, he would happily back off into the box, and then he would just allow him to come onto him, and then just time it really well, when to use his body, when to show him down the line or show him inside and get support. That was really encouraging. I think there are elements of his game that the coaching staff will want to refine and improve, which is great. If they can do that, then he's going to become a better player. I do know that one of the Taylor's focus. He wants to get kind of stronger and bigger. That again, that's only a positive. So yeah, it's kind of, I said on Twitter on it's surreal to be excited by and looking forward to Saturday just because you're going to see a right back. But no, it's like you said, it's one of the most impressive debuts I can remember in certainly some time.
Yeah, and look, there maybe is a contributing factor might be that right back has been one of our biggest issues over the last 2 seasons, and potentially because of there's such a huge gap between what we've maybe had during the last 2 years and what we now look as if we've got. That's maybe sort of added to the sort of hype as well, and it'll be up to him and it'll be up to the management to maybe try and you don't want to dismiss it or sort of diminish it in any way, because I think it's good for the fans to get giddy about players. But again, I think I've seen aspects of his game, even over 1.5 matches, to know that there is going to be occasions where, we maybe are going to be sort of covering for him. And in that case, having Kent next to him is the ideal man, given how he plays his game and just gets on with it. But yeah, again, you'll take the positives over the negatives. And if we can get Salazar in at left back, and if he's anything like that, then that just sort of adds to the optimism.
Oh yeah, massively. That's it's walking out. If I can't remember walking out of a draw being so encouraged. And we talked about Taylor. I thought it was a really strong performance again from Kenneth Vargas. I think he's a player that we're all really excited by. It was just that final moment that was he just didn't deliver. But looking at his pace, his willingness to engage defenders, you have to look at. He bullied Ben Davies off the park, and he did similar to John Souttar, using his body so well, happy to engage them, happy to thrive in that physical side of things as well.
Yeah, and it was all intelligently done as well. And in particular, that run where he just times it so that he's in his own half. It's little things like that. You could even see a marked improvement between that performance and the one he put in at Hampden, which was only April this year. So you think if that's the trajectory he's on, even over a sort of 3-4 month spell, then you can just imagine where he might be come the sort of winter break. So yeah, that was really encouraging. And again, we probably don't need to see him up top every week, and it could be that there's opportunities for him to either play off the front man, play coming in off the right. But against Rangers and Celtic, when you don't want your front line to be isolated, I think he showed there that he's definitely got a role to play in that sort of a bit similar to the Gino role from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really hopeful that if Shankland and Vargas can get a run together, there will be a very strong partnership that defences will hate coming up against. And I suppose, kind of just to finish up on the Rangers game, unless there's anything else you want to bring up, but do you feel, don't want to end on a negative just because I thought it was a positive performance? It's kind of too open-ended question, but do you think Hearts deserve to win on Saturday, going back to what you said, like the Clement questions and Naismith's view on it on Saturday? And secondly, do you feel it was a missed opportunity because of the state Rangers are in at the moment?
So I think, addressing the first question, I would say we didn't deserve to win. And I think the reason for that is we just touched on it briefly there, talking about Vargas' performance. There was just a little bit missing. We were just lacked that little bit of being concise when we're in the final third. And I'm not just aiming that at Vargas. I think Shankland had occasions where he was actually guilty of not lifting his head, which isn't something you would normally throw at Lawrence Shankland. But there was a couple of opportunities in the second half where he just wanted to keep the ball just that little touch or two longer than he probably should have done.
Yeah.
And I think when you add that in there, considering the good possession we had in our final third, the fact that we didn't get a goal, yep, sometimes you can say that's down to luck, but I wouldn't say that about Saturday. I felt there was still a little bit of that decision-making that still needs to be improved upon. And because of that, I think we probably, a draw was probably a fair result. I think in terms of getting Rangers, I think, it was a good time to get them. And yes, you could say that it's probably the best time to get 3 points. But we're on the 6th of August. although I still see there being a bit of movement incoming and outgoing wise at Ibrox, I don't think it's going to be to the extent that they need to really pull away from the rest of the pack. And when I say that, I know that there's every chance they'll still finish in the top two. But what I'm meaning is I don't see them going to teams and turning them over.
Yeah.
And it's not just a personnel thing. I was quite surprised with just how direct they were in the first half on Saturday. Now, I did say prior to that that's something I've quite admired about Clement, because he's not afraid to go direct, but I think you've got to have the right personnel to do it. And I don't think he had that. And that's not just a dig at Dessers. I actually don't think I'm saying it with regards to Dessers. I think it's the likes of Lawrence and that. I think you need people in that midfield that can compete for those second balls and loose balls. And Lawrence doesn't offer you that for that number 10 position. So yeah, I think we were fortunate to get Rangers where we did. And yeah, I don't think we deserved the 3 points, but it's one of those performances where if we'd come out of it with 3, you could, there is things that you could have pointed to, or examples of performances where you could have said, yeah, we definitely deserved it. But I'm happy with the point, really happy with the performance more than anything else. And I actually was surprised by elements of it. There was how quick we were to transition from defence to attack really did surprise me. And not just with regards to the balls we were playing for Vargas, but it was actually the support that he was getting from Mackay and Danda. That's what really encouraged me at spells in the first half. That was something I wasn't expecting to see. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we talked about it or mentioned on Friday's episode where I was hesitant to criticise Tom Lawrence, but I just say just a player he just offers nothing. And then we're recording just before the Rangers Dynamo Kiev game, and the Rangers 11 that's put up there, I think it might even be worse than the one that was against that was fielded against.
I know Balogun and McCausland are in, so
Balogun
and Davis is out, but Scott Wright's still in there.
Suter, Suter and Cortez are out. So it's Balogun and Davis. So yeah, it's they've certainly got a lot of work to do, but we are not here to talk about Rangers and there are many else as much as we get to do. Before we move on to discuss Europa League draw, just bring in some comments. Graham says, "Hi guys, really pleased with the performance and plenty of positives. Clearly Grant stood out. Devlin, Grant, Rolls and Penrice all deserve a mention. Most games v Rangers will lose all the battles on the pitch, but that was different. The Saturday one so much more and we look comfortable." Chris Styler said, "Team looked good on Saturday, just lacking sharpness in front of goal, but hopefully this will be rectified in the next game and take 4 points." Rangers fan AG says, "I thought you were the better team, but not by a significant margin. Taylor is much better than Tavernier." And all-time Atkins has been here, has never had a performance like Taylor. And I thought we had a better bench than Rangers, and it's only going to get better with players who missed out. Scott says, "I think it was apparently as Baron Defo moved his arm towards where the ball was going." We'll touch on that in a second. Adam asks, "Any Salazar update? Do we need to announce him by tomorrow for him to be eligible to travel for the first leg of Euro playoff?" So it seemed that Atletico Nacional or his team, well, they confirmed he was off to Hearts, but basically confirmed that he was off to Hearts, but whether they actually confirmed the deal was done, the deal was not been completed yet, but we don't need to announce him by tomorrow because we've got until the 16th, I think it is, to register them for the Europa League playoffs. So again, 10 days. But with transfers, especially transfers coming from South Central America, they take there's a number of factors to consider, and it's never just a straightforward process. For example, work permit, visa. Just before we move on, what was your view of the penalty, Scott? I didn't think under the new rules, under the way that Willie Collum wants the referees to ref, I didn't think it was a penalty, nor should it be a penalty. I think, and just the way it should be refed.
I think the most pleasing aspect of the incident is that if this is a sign of VAR becoming less involved in every handball decision, then I'm all for it. I think what people have forgotten about the handball rule is even pre-VAR, even going back 30, 40 years, it's always been a rule that's been open to interpretation and has always lacked consistency because various referees will all have a different standpoint on what constitutes, hand to ball and
Yeah.
all these other various aspects. So I think when they decided to get really involved and sort of micro-analyse every decision in the box, there was far too many penalties getting given, and I felt like they were kind of taking the responsibility away for the referees as well. Now, I'm not expecting every referee to look at that incident on Saturday and decide the same way Nick Walsh does. So I know for a fact there will be occasions this season, and it might happen in our favour or against our favour, where a similar incident to that will happen. And because it's a different referee to Nick Walsh, he'll look at that and he'll maybe give the penalty. I think we've just got to accept that that might happen. What I don't want to see happen is inconsistency with regards to Nick Walsh handles it. So if that's how Nick Walsh views that particular viewpoint or that incident, that's how he should do it for the rest of the season. And that should be his consistent sort of take and again interpretation of that law. I think where I'm concerned about is if we play Rangers away, Nick Walsh is the referee, does the decision get given? But in terms of the fact that they've sort of, you know, the threshold seems to have been higher, you know, raised with regards to that, I'm quite happy and content with that. And I actually thought, bar 2 or 3 very harsh bookings that he gave on Saturday, including the one to Diamonde in the second half, I thought that Nick Walsh actually handled the game okay.
Yeah, a couple. Yeah, like I said, there's always going to be a couple of things you pinpoint. Certainly was not nearly the worst performance seen from referee. Again, it's one. Try not to focus too much on the ref either. Liam says, let's hold off and praise off the ref and VAR till we see the reaction when roles are reversed, just as Scott said. Graham mentions Euro draw is very favourable. Could have been worse, and I think it's a winnable tie. Will probably be Pilsen, but it's a game we can look forward to. What did you make of the Europa League playoff round draw, Scott? Where we'll play the winners of Victoria Pilsen or I don't know how to pronounce her name. I should have looked at Kribas, Ukrainian side who were formed.
Yeah, the team that were the amateurs up until only a few years ago, I think.
They've got a really, really complex history where they've been different clubs, different names. It's a strange one. But what did you make of the draw? And I suppose you're probably looking at the two teams and thinking that the most likely is it's going to be Victoria Pilsen.
Yeah, and I think relatively speaking, compared to who we could have got in the group, I think this is one of the most winnable ties that we've been given. Fingers crossed we can get the home tie as the second leg, or at least that's what I'd be looking for. I'd quite like to get the second leg at home. But it's a winnable tie. I think we do have to give them respect. It was only a couple of years ago they were playing Champions League football, albeit I think they were in the group of death along with Barcelona in that one year. But they are a team that have a richer European pedigree than we do. So I think you've got to respect that, even if you maybe feel that the league that they're involved in is maybe on par with ours. They've clearly got a squad that maybe have a bit more of a higher ceiling in terms of their value. So there will be players within that team that we have to stand up to and definitely sort of keep an eye on. But yeah, I don't see any reason why we can't go in there with the mindset of sort of winning the tie. Now, whether that's something that all Hearts fans want to see, this is where there's this sort of, there's definitely a bit of a split feeling. I think there's some Hearts fans that feel that there may be more long-term value, but short-term pain and going out at this stage and going into the conference, maybe racking up a few more results and potentially with a bit of luck getting out of that group. Whereas with the Europa League group, the chances of that are quite minimal, but you get the sort of prize money right at the beginning of that. So I can see both arguments, but for me, when Hearts are playing a game of football, even if it's tiddlywinks, I want them to win. So that stuff just goes to the back of my mind, and I'm just hoping we can get through. We can then deal with the logistics of having a nightmare sort of round the games against all the top teams in Europe after that. But yeah, definitely a favourable draw, and really just can't wait now for the 22nd to roll round.
Yeah, so the home tie is second. So we're the 22nds, we play away, and then the home ties the 29th.
I wasn't sure if that had been confirmed yet.
So they basically had, if I read the rules right, or UEFA rules right yesterday, they had until 5 p.m. yesterday to switch it. Though I think the only thing that needs to be confirmed now is the timings. But That's the way I read it, was that they would I think the timings get done by Friday, and then any reversals had to be kind of firmed last night. Obviously, the spanner in the works is the Ukrainian side, not 100% sure where they're playing, but having seen Andrew mentions it, great draw, flights already booked. I know I spoke to a pal this morning, he's already booked his flights to Prague, so I think there'll be a few Hearts fans I think.
I hope it's not a repeat of people that got those flights over to Russia for, was it Krasnodar?
Krasnodar, yeah.
But then obviously Barkara obviously knocked us out. So hopefully there's not a repeat of the result from last time.
Yeah, I looked at it as, when I first seen it, I was like, oh, that's winnable. And then I tweeted it, and then I was looking at Pilsen, the most successful Czech side since 2010, being in Europe every single season since 2010. There are established Europeans, certainly over the last 15 years, established Europeans side. So it's they're definitely going to be the trickier ones. But I would put them in, certainly put them in the kind of FC Zurich category, maybe slightly better in terms of the last time we played in the Europa League playoff, that we survive the away tie, and then if you're in the tie, when you come back to Tynecastle, there's every chance of doing it. So yeah, like you, I'm just I can't wait for them to come around. And like you, I'm like, oh no, Conference League would be good because it'd be great to qualify from that. But now I'm thinking, I guess let's just go Europa League, extra home game, money that comes with it, and just see what the Europa League brings. So it's there could be worse situations to be in, like Hibs not being in Europe for one. Just before we finish, let's talk about, because once we know who the identity of the team is, we'll talk about the European games in more depth. But just quickly on Stephen Kingsley, signed a new 3-year deal today. It's been in the pipeline for a while. Keeps him at the D club until 2027. He is the second. He's made the second highest. Sorry, he's made the second highest number of appearances behind Craig Gordon in the current squad. It was Scott a no-brainer.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think versatility alone, I think he'll be good in the dressing room. You can see him being one of those experienced figures that'll sort of make sure that younger players that come into the squad, players from overseas that are coming in the squad, that they're bedding in well. I do look at the likes of him, Boyce, Frankie Kent, Shanklin being very integral to that. I think it was a no-brainer. I think the finances involved, I can't imagine there would have been too much to negotiate there in terms of the previous contracts he's been on before as well. He said himself in the interview that he done with Hearts earlier on this afternoon that it's the happiest he's been in his career, in terms of being settled with his family. So that's clearly played a big factor as well. And there really just was no reason at all why we wouldn't offer that type of deal. And I can't see the downside on it. I really don't, because I don't think he's one of our highest earners. So that I know sometimes when you offer 3-year contracts, one of the first things you think about is if they're a high earner, can we cover that over that sort of 3-year period? But I think Stephen Kingsley falls well within our sort of wage bracket just now. I don't see that being an issue. And again, he's had that consistency. If you take out maybe 2, not last season, but the season before last, where he did have some personal things going on, I think he's been a model of consistency the other 3 seasons. And that alone's reason to be offering him that type of deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think he's in a really settled place on and off the pitch. He's especially at an age, kids are at an age where you don't kind of just think he's very comfortable to uproot them, and he is one of those, I think, reference points within the dressing room. He knows Scottish football. He knows the club. He's perfect for new players coming in, that they've got this guy who knows what it takes to be a success at Hearts, knows what it takes to be a success in Scottish football. And just the way that Hearts want to operate, you need to have continuity within the squad. And like you said, you mentioned like the likes of Boyce, and like hopefully Kent gets into the kind of that bracket. The guys who are here and almost like set the standards. I think that's what Naismith said in his when the announcement was, that if he sets the standards, that is That's what he wants from him, and he's been great over the last 4 years. You mentioned kind of wee bit last 2 seasons ago, but he's recovered to be his best. He's so important. His versatility is just massive. I think he's played right wing back, left wing back, right-sided centre-back in a 3, left-sided centre-back in a 3, the middle of a 3, left-sided centre-back in a 4. So he's hugely beneficial on that end. Michael Ovens asked what's happening with Colombian left-back. Still progressing. Club still looking to sign him. Hopefully over the course of the next week before the Europa League deadline for registering players, he will hopefully be confirmed. Raymond Wren, Europa League or Conference, which would you prefer and which do you think the club would? I think Scott and I kind of just discussed it. When it gets to this stage, just win the ties, get into Europa League. And I think in terms of the club, Europa League probably brings in more money, so that's over the piece. Definitely brings in more money. So I would imagine the Europa League is the one that the club would prefer, and it's one that Naismith prefers as well. I think he's been on record saying that you want to test yourself at the highest level, so that would be the Europa League. But we will leave it there. Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you very much, everyone, for asking questions, listening, contributing, engaging, subscribing, etc., etc. Very much appreciated. We will be back at some point later in the week. Whether it's Scott, whether it's someone else, we will let you know. I need to get my finger out and actually ask people within enough time so that they can come on. But that'll be me for the rest. That'll be me. Trying to do that for the rest of the week. So we'll see how we get on with that. But until the next time, I hope everyone has a nice evening and has a good week. And we'll catch you again soon. Good.